You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
The source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high. A lot of things.
State of MedTech.
With your host, Omar and Khateeb.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, and it's great to be back. As many of you know, for the month of May, it kind of took a little bit of a break from the podcast. A break for us is just doing an episode or two a week versus our usual 2 to 3 episodes a week. But now I'm back from great trip to Turkey, very well rested, and we're coming in hot with a very, I'd say a pretty hot topic. That's GLP-1s. In the landscape where GLP-1 agonists are becoming increasingly more dominant in the conversation, we hear it all over the place, in the news, on social media, when it comes to weight loss and weight management. There weren't a lot of people that I felt comfortable having on the show to talk about this. And so our guest today is somebody who really specializes in that because of their background. So Paul Hickey is the CEO of Reshape Lifescience. Reshape is a premier physician-led weight loss and metabolic health solutions company. Many of you might know them from their FDA-approved lap band, which provides a minimally invasive long-term treatment of obesity and its alternative to more invasive surgical stapling procedures. Reshape is a great example of one of those companies that might be under threat because of GLP-1s. Paul sees it differently. And so the conversation is quite interesting in terms of how GLP-1s are going to have an impact on the landscape of medicine, and more importantly, how it's going to change the way patients look at adopting weight loss procedures and solutions. And so in this episode, we cover all that and more. It's a really good one. And we cover, a little bit about his background in the medtech industry, but more importantly, how we should think about GLP-1s. So it's a really fascinating one, especially for those of you who are investors who are trying to get a better understanding of GLP-1s and their impact on the market. By the way, this podcast, nor, as well as everything I'm saying, is not investment advice. Don't listen to my advice for investment. I'm just a guy with a podcast, but I'm trying to provide some education and information for you. Now, that being said, if you're a startup founder and you're looking to get some help, to get some commercial traction, maybe you're having a hard time finding customers, those are the kind of things that not only limit your ability to grow your valuation, but also raise money. This is where my company, Khateeb & Co., can help you. We've worked with a lot of different medtech companies, not only to raise awareness of their company to investors, but also get traction by building commercial pipeline, aka actual deals and physicians who are interested in the technology. That becomes very easy also when it comes to raising money. So if you're interested to learn more and see how we do that using social media, go and book time with me. Go to khateebandco.com. That's KhateebAndco.com and book time with me there, or just go to my LinkedIn profile and shoot me a message and we'll see if we can work together. So with that being said, let's get on to our episode with Paul Hickey, the CEO of Reshape Lifesciences. Enjoy.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. For today's episode, we're covering a hot topic that's been big in the last few years, whether you're an investor or a consumer, and that is GLP-1, essentially the magic pill that makes everybody just lose weight, right? And this has been such a phenomenon in the biotech and pharmaceutical space that even medical device companies such as Stryker had to come out and give comment on it because there was a concern that the effect of GLP-1 was going to affect their orthopedics business. So who better to have on the show to talk about this than Paul Hickey. Paul is the CEO of Reshape Lifesciences, which is America's premier weight loss and metabolic health solutions company. They're also publicly traded. So if you want to look up their ticker, Paul, the ticker is
RSLS.
LS is perfect. And I know you guys maybe not everybody knows about Reshape. Everybody knows about lap band, which is one of your products. So Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Maybe for the audience they've heard of GLP-1, not so familiar, maybe we start out with what exactly is GLP-1 and we'll go from there.
Yeah, first off, you can almost back up and say, let's talk about obesity for a bit too, because we've been in a society for so long where obesity has been normalized, where it's the only disease I know of that you can walk down the street and knowingly have and not go seek medical attention. And GLP-1s, which were introduced early last year, and the big pharma dollars that you see with the marketing, and you see Oprah's special that was out just recently, are talking about a drug that ultimately helps anyone who needs to address their weight loss and allows people to ultimately to feel full, feel less hungry, have a healthy relationship with food. And they are extremely important in the fight against obesity. And you mentioned several companies, and like Reshape, we too have been affected by the introduction of the GLP-1s. Initially, it started as a bit of a headwind because we market directly to consumers, those that are making their journey and trying to figure out what their next step is to address their weight. And with the GLP-1, put a bit of headwind on our marketing effort. But ultimately, we felt like that's short term because as you read any article, any journal, or any paper, there's just millions of people who are seeking the GLP-1s to as their first step of
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting you mentioned that, which is like obesity is not only normalized these days, but in many cases celebrated. And I think which is really concerning because it's a disease. It's something that, and it's not to disparage anybody, but there are long-term effects to this, including people follow on social media. A lot of the body positivity movement influencers, a lot of them, and this is factual, are dead. They've literally died.
I think you're right. I think what the GLP-1s have helped do is to help normalize the discussion of weight loss and obesity. We all probably I have friends and relatives that could lose weight. And the hardest thing is recognize first that obesity is a disease. It's not a condition. It's not a lifestyle choice. It's a combination of things, certainly fueled by mental health issues, and the food industry doesn't help it at all either. But once someone gains over, let's say, 50 pounds in excess weight, they have a single-digit chance of losing that weight on their own without medical attention. And the importance of that is, as you said about the comorbidity of being obese, is once you gain additional weight, obesity is in an inflammation state. Your body is not able to balance. Liver and the pancreas are fighting each other with your insulin resistance and the amount of sugars that are in your blood. And ultimately, that causes increased risk of heart issues, cancers. Certainly, your bone and joints don't appreciate the extra weight you walk around with. So over time, if you don't address it, you're fueling all the other medical specialties. And unfortunately, society, we've become very used to that, where you go in for your joint pain, and the first thing you may hear is you can have a knee replacement versus let's get some weight off your body and let's see how you feel then. So again, I think that the real positive thing for our company, as well as for others that deal in the obesity space or diabetic space, is that the GLP-1s are really kind of bringing everyone to a higher level of understanding what the disease is, and that you have an option. And the one thing to stress with anyone who's contemplating obesity and their obesity and looking at weight loss is there is no silver bullet. The GLP-1s are not something that you can take by themselves and ultimately cure your obesity. Obesity is a very resilient disease. It's going to last your lifetime. And it's a matter of making sure you talk to the right medical professional to figure out the journey that you should take, starting with most likely the least invasive option, moving to a more aggressive option, which includes bariatric.
Yeah, and I'm on that same note, I wanted to ask you, because when GLP-1 came out, like Stryker had to make a comment about it because the thought was that they were going to do less knees. Stryker actually came out and said that they expect more knee procedures to be done because now a lot of patients who did not technically qualify for the knee procedure because they were obese or they were just too heavy now qualify for it. There has been publications like, and I always try and I never know the right way to reference this, but I always go with first author and last author, but Haberger and Shop wrote a piece called GLP-1R agonism enhances adjustable gastric banding in diet-induced obese rates. So essentially saying that GLP-1 is helpful in conjunction with procedures like what your company has out there. Are you starting to see that? Because I feel like in the last couple of years since GLP-1 came out, everybody rushed to it and said, that's the magic pill. I don't have to do anything else, whether it's gastric bypass surgery, exercise, etc. How's your company been affected by that, and how's it adjusted?
Yeah, I think to answer the question, that combination therapy, as the physicians are calling it, where you have lap band or a gastric sleeve or bypass, and you may plateau in your weight, and you may lose 25 pounds in the first year or year plus, and then your plateau, you've got some life event or that the relationship with your food is altered and becomes healthy again. The physicians that we work with are working with the patients. They're prescribing the GLP-1s to augment that therapy of the surgical procedure. So it's happening now. And I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see data on those patients, what the outcomes are. But it goes back to what I said, even lap band alone, gastric sleeve or bypass are very good safe procedure, but they may not be lifelong procedures in terms of allowing each individual to keep their weight off. And that's where the GLP-1s are going to be extremely valuable to those individuals. So I think you're right. There's all sorts of articles that are going to be published, some that have already been written, but we're in early stages of understanding the long-term effects of GLP-1s and how that works in combination therapy. But for the average listener, GLP-1, you could lose, let's say, 20 to 25% of your body weight. So if you're 300 pounds, you're down to, let's say, 240 or 230, you may plateau with just GLP-1. So you're still going to want to get under 200, depending on your height and characteristics. And that's where, again, a more aggressive procedure will come into play, where your physician will say, you got to taste weight loss, no pun intended, but let's move to a more aggressive procedure. And that's where, again, lap band or gastric sleeve or bypass would be presented and discussed with the individual.
So are you saying that essentially because of GLP-1, that similar to what I mentioned with Stryker and other companies, that your TAM or total addressable market essentially has expanded now because there are more patients that qualify? So then is it right to think about that GLP-1 is a great, pun intended, I guess it's a good gateway drug in the sense that patient can get on it, get down to a weight that qualifies them for a lap band procedure or some bariatric procedure, and then from there that gets them into a healthier BMI? Is that the right way to think about it?
Let me back up and say that of the individual, prior to GLP-1s, of the individuals that qualified for bariatric surgery under most insurance plans and under most of the policies and procedures and recommendations by the specialties, including the American Bariatric and Metabolic Surgery Society, those that could qualify, only 1% have surgery. Only 1%. So you've got 99% of the population that could qualify for bariatric surgery don't seek surgery. And the question is, well, why? We've normalized obesity, so they're walking around thinking, I don't really need to lose this weight. My joints hurt, my back hurts, I don't do as much physically. But they're just avoiding addressing the weight loss they need to achieve. The second piece is people are afraid of surgery. It varies by individual, but to say that you're obese and your next step is to seek out help and potentially have surgery, that's a huge gap between people that are knowing they have obesity to jumping into the operating room to have our surgical procedure. So what GLP-1s are doing, going back to having this gateway conversation or drug, people are becoming more aware of it. They're seeing it endorsed by celebrities. I've got friends who don't qualify for surgery, certainly are trying the GLP-1s just to try to get themselves ready for a wedding or to lose an extra 5 or 10 pounds. But those individuals, those conversations, feeding the surgeons and the ability for them to talk to people about doing or having a more invasive bariatric.
Got it. That makes sense. Just out of curiosity, and again, this is just for me on the medtech side, but when you look at I don't know what you would call the market, gastric bypass market, but you have a variety of different players. Ethicon is one of the larger players, a few others. What kind of differentiates like Reshape versus some of these other players in terms of the technology you have? So like weight loss technology, this is a new world for me. I work with a lot of robotic companies that do bariatric surgery, but the actual tech is new for me. So I was very excited to have you on the show.
Again, thanks for having me. But I think I've been medical device for 25, 30 years, started off in engineering out of school. And so I've always gravitated towards the techie stuff. The obesity market, the bariatric surgery market, is really comprised of about 5 procedures. And one of those is the lap. And so the most popular procedure done in the U.S. is the gastric sleeve. And that's the old stomach stapling where they take out 80% of your stomach. And the next more aggressive procedure beyond that is the gastric bypass, and that is then rerouting your stomach. All really achieve the same thing, and that's to have you eat less. And there is some change, with the hormones and whatnot that I won't get into on this program, but ultimately that's part of the resetting of your brain so that you have a healthy balance of hormones that allow you to understand when you're hungry and when you're full and have a little more acuteness to those sensitivities. The difference for Reshape is we're in the same market, but our product is a bariatric procedure. It's a surgery, but it's the safest in terms of issues, complications related to a bariatric surgery. And that's all published. It's been around for 20 years, and it's also a procedure that does not change a person's anatomy. Essentially, the analogy I use is that it's like taking a 5 or 6 lane highway and then you move it down to a 2 or 3 lane highway. And that's with a silicone band that goes around the top of the stomach, just south of the esophageal stomach junction. And so what it essentially has, the impact it has on individuals is it creates that slowing down of the food and the digestion, and people have to eat less. They have to more slowly and ultimately achieve the weight loss by feeling full and less hungry during the day and night. Again, as I mentioned, it's a band that goes around the top of the stomach. It also is adjustable. Someone may not be able to tolerate a 2-lane highway, and so there's a port that allows the surgeon to inject saline that either tightens up that highway or loosens it up to allow for a 3-lane highway. So it's an adjustable band that, again, allows the individual and the caregiver, the surgeon or the physician's office, to personalize the treatment and the therapy depending on the individual goal. There's women who come in with a lap band after 5 years and they're pregnant. So it might be that the surgeon says, let's do this while you're pregnant. We're going to loosen up the band. So ultimately removing any therapy so that someone who's pregnant don't have to worry about the caloric intake, and they can just focus on having a healthy delivery of their child. And you have others who may come in after 5 years, 10 years, and they've plateaued in weight loss. They've had a stress in their life. And so surgeons will tighten the band up a little bit and recreate that feeling of fullness. And so again, it's a unique product, and that A, it's the least invasive, B, it's been around for 20 years. And I think those two things combined with all of the new sort of awareness with the GLP-1s, really providing a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I was familiar with essentially changing the anatomy of the stomach, whether it's through stapling or rerouting. But essentially what your guys' device does, and I was looking it up on its website. So for those who are interested, you can go to Reshape Lifesciences.com. But essentially it goes right at the esophageal junction below the stomach, essentially just makes it smaller so that it takes longer for food to pass into the stomach.
Yeah, and our device, along with sleeve or the bypass, all do the same thing. As well as one, they prevent you from eating a lot. So the idea of with the lap band, what can you eat or not eat, depends on the individual. But ultimately, what you have to do is make sure when you have a lap band and you talk to your provider of the lap band to figure out what diet you can have, depending on how far out from the surgery you are. But people adjust their diet accordingly, and ultimately their goals of achieving weight are achieved pretty quickly with any of the surgical procedures. But the lap band, it's the one that's adjustable, right? Where you go back in and you find yourself able to swallow probably enough food that your weight loss is good, but it's not great. So the doctor can adjust the lap band, make it a little bit tighter for you, go down to a 1.5 or 2-lane highway if you're at a 3-lane highway. So it all is, again, very adaptable to the individual based on what their goals are.
Got it. Right now, like in the marketplace, what would you say is the main competitor to your product in terms of when a patient decides to go and get some kind of procedure? Like, what are some of the things that you guys are up against?
I think when you, as an individual, as a patient, when you go in to talk to any surgeon about even a total hip or total knee, you're going to face the bias of the physicians and how they were trained and what their implant of choice is. And so I think part of our challenge is to always just educate and provide enough information on our website and other direct-to-consumer marketing effort where individuals who are approaching their physician and are making a huge and very important decision to seek out a surgery consult, that they have enough information in their hand to be able to have a very good dialogue with their physician. And again, it goes along with lap band, gastric sleeve, or bypass. There are some physicians who are very favorable towards sleeve, some are very favorable toward bypass, and some for lap bands. But it's a matter of finding what you're interested in as an individual, and then finding the right health professional to have those.
Got it. One of those decisions, because whether we like it or not, like medicine is a business, and so there's always economic factors that influence it. In terms of the reimbursement and codes that are involved, what does that reimbursement look like roughly, like for, let's say, procedure like lap band compared to like gastric bypass, et cetera?
Yeah, question. And lap band's broadly reimbursed. And so there's very few plans in the U.S. that don't cover it. I think for most individuals listening to this, it's a matter of just seeking out, going to your physician, looking at your insurance and having a discussion with whatever payer that that happens to be the insurer of that individual. So I think it's really interesting with the GLP-1s that are broadly not reimbursed, is that if those are ever reimbursed, it'll turn the insurance company landscape upside down with the burden that cost would put on the system. So I think what's interesting, we've seen in an access to care committee that the American Society of Metabolic Surgeons have, and I sit on that as an industry representative. We've had a lot of insurance companies actually opening up their guidelines for surgery over the last 9 months. And the belief is it's because they understand that when you look at the return on investment, with putting someone on GLP-1s for life or having a single event surgery, the return on the investment in terms of the value of the procedure or their drug that she'll get is much more for a surgical procedure than to pay $1,000 in pocket if you're having to do that with a GLP-1 per month for life, right? It adds up pretty quick. But yeah, I think we see in our seasonality, anyone who's involved in surgery, whether it's hip, knee or otherwise, as people get towards the end of the year and deductibles are paid, that's when surgeries tend to be scheduled. And you have a pretty heavy fourth quarter because of that. And then the first quarter is a little bit light. But yeah, the good news is that Lap-Band is broadly reimbursed for those who are interested.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. And do you feel like what has been like one of the main barriers to adoption, like at least with surgeons?
Yeah, there hasn't been a barrier as much as it's a 20-year-old product, and surgeons like any other tech medical field, like to have innovations. And we, over the last, I'd say, 5 years of the Lap-Band, have probably suffered from a bit of disenchantment with some physicians. And the reason being is it was old and there was no innovation, and it's changed the ownership of the Lap-Band has changed several times over the last decade. What I mentioned to you, one of the benefits of the Lap-Band is the adjustments that happen in office. Some physicians see that as not so favorable. You do a gastric sleeve or bypass, you're really not seeing the patient afterwards. It's just talk to the dietitian and monitor your diet, but there's no post-operative adjustments of any of those procedures because you're essentially cutting out the stomach or rerouting the intestine. So that sort of negative adjustment factor with physicians is something we've been working to address. And that's, I think you may have read, we had a Lap-Band 2.0 Flex, which was approved late last year and is now in the early stages of launch. And what that Flex design does is allows for when physicians will see a patient late night with the existing original Lap-Band because someone may have swallowed too big a bagel or some other piece of food that they just can't digest and won't pass through that 2-lane highway. So they'll go into the office and the doctor will be, whatever time of night or morning, have to essentially withdraw the fluid, let the highway open up the 3-4 lane, let the food bullet pass. Flex has that sort of built in. There's a pressure relief valve that if someone does chew something or swallow something inadvertently, and it's too big to normally pass through the Lap-Band, with normal swallowing pressures, it's still punitive, but with normal swallowing pressures, that bolus should be able to pass through the Lap-Band by way of the band temporarily opening up and then closing back down to its intended therapy level. So that, I think, is going to help remedy some of the negativity and headwinds we've had with surgeons who may have tried Lap-Band and then just fall out of favor with it just based on the maintenance. That's part of the treatment with the Lap-Band.
But I'm wondering, and again, this is something new for me, but wouldn't it be better if surgeons had patients having to come in to have that adjustment? Isn't that something that they can bill for, or I'm guessing not? And that's why the 2.0 is just better in terms of convenience for the surgeon, but also better service, better quality of life for the patient.
Yeah, it's the economics, right? But I think that's a great discussion, almost enough material there for a second. But in general, yes, surgeons make the most when they cut, and having patients come in and for adjustment is something that they can make revenue off of. But ultimately, it's not as essentially cost effective as having someone in the operating room. But that said, I think the American Academy of Metabolic Bariatric Surgeons have done a really good job of pivoting over the last 12 months to start treating their patients like a lot of other specialties. And I think analogy is like an oncologist would treat a cancer patient where you have cancer for life. And you want to start with the least invasive and move to the most aggressive care that is possible. because like a cancer, obesity, as I said, is resilient and it come back, and it's something you got to just be on guard with as an individual. If you have it and you've lost your weight, it's easy for it to come back. So I think what physicians are understanding now is this continuum of care would allow them with the lap band, with GLP-1, to see when someone plateaus at the lap band. And if it doesn't work, then they can still pull out the lap band, and because it's reversible, and then move to a more aggressive procedure like a gastric sleeve or bypass. So I think those discussions are now being held on the podium with the bariatric society, and I think that's largely going to be the standard of care going forward, as you'll see more shift to being least invasive to more invasive, knowing that you've got that 99% been on the sideline that now is coming off because they've had a taste of GLP-1s potentially, or at least are now aware of their health and wanting to seek a better quality of life.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And I think that's in line with what we're seeing for consumer healthcare, which is, I don't think COVID was the event that caused it, but I think it accelerated a lot of things. And one of those things is that consumer consciousness around healthcare. It's also because big tech is moving in. So it's like I'm wearing a Whoop device, which is tracking all the vital signs of mine. But I think at least here in the States, the desire is the most least invasive options with lifestyle changes, and then moving towards the more invasive options. And so that seems like it's in line with what's going on with GLP-1s. Did you say then, based on that, GLP-1s are more of a tailwind for products like Lap-Band versus a headwind?
100%. Yeah, that's the mid to long-term impact, and starting to see that already. I have an advisory board of clinicians, surgeons, and some other scientists, one of the best I've ever had in my career. And first part of last year, I remember asking the question, is GLP-1s, have they had an impact? And everyone said, no, they really haven't. And then fast forward a couple of months towards the end of the first quarter of last year, the referral chain and the patients come into their office really slowed down quite a bit. And keeping in mind that it's not just bariatric surgeons and the weight loss clinics that can prescribe GLP-1s. You've got cardiologists, you've got others who have picked up how to make sure they try to address weight loss with their patient prior to having a surgery for whatever it be, joints or they're trying to address. But yeah, that one for sure.
Do you think that's maybe that's another initiative for companies in the weight loss category of med device, which is educating these primary care clinicians who are now prescribing GLP-1s when to identify patients who might be a better fit for a lap band procedure or something else, and then referring them to the surgeon? I think that's like the big focus now. I think 10 years ago, primary care didn't have as much leverage as they do today, but now because of technology and so many other things, they're the gateway to so many different things. So do you feel like that's a big area to focus on?
Yeah, I think in business, we call it lead nurturing. There's a lot of, once you have someone reaches out, gets on our website and wants to see if they qualify for a lap band, they may not be near ready to have surgery, and they may be just exploring their options. And for us, it's important to help those individuals seek out professional help and GLP-1s. They're appropriate candidates for that. But I think that lead nurturing and capturing that lead and moving that lead through whatever stages of weight loss they're encountering is important for us. And any step of the way that we can support them with products. Sure.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting, especially just given that GLP-1, it's one of the few. I can't think of the last time. I don't know. Maybe it was Viagra or something. I can't think of the last time that a pharmaceutical drug had this much impact in terms of consumer awareness. Like everybody I know, whether it's consumers or investors, they're talking about it. It's just going to be really interesting in the next few years to see how this affects weight loss medical device companies like yours, and especially how we change the way we educate the consumer, but also the end users, whether it's like referring doctors or surgeons.
Oh, for sure. We have other technologies in our R&D dungeon that are on our website, or at least I've certainly talked about them in my earnings calls. But one of them is it's called a DBSN. It's essentially a neurostimulation and blocking device that this is a little bit out there, but we put lead on the pancreas as well as on the liver, and we'll actually stimulate the pancreas to essentially release insulin, and will block the liver from secreting glucose or sugar. So we essentially take the imbalance that exists with someone who's pre-diabetic or diabetic and normalize that with the blocking and stimulation of the liver and the pancreas. again, it's not ready for humans. We've done the pigs, and we're moving into heavily funded by research grants that have been awarded, I think over $1 million to date. But that's science. That idea is super attractive. But you also, again, going back to what's the future of GLP-1, I'm sure Big Pharma's doing the same thing in their research labs, coming up with the next iterations of GLP-1s that will be improved, whether it's side effects or instead of it's a shot, it's an oral pill that's taken once a month, something, right? But you have to approach this with the size of this disease is worldwide. It's not just adult, it's children. You're not going to want to essentially do surgeries or give drugs that have systemic effect to kid or women in childbearing years and other sort of age group that just can't either tolerate or afford or whatever the reason take on that therapy up. So we still believe that with Lifescience 2.0, if there's a 3.0, and certainly this technology I mentioned that so far wonders pigs, those things I think would be in the next 5, 10 plus years out, where we will have more data to look at it and say, okay, here's the care path that is proven with solid data along the way. I do have to mention one thing quick. With one of the last pigs we had with that neuroblock stim device, we actually tried to induce diabetes by feeding the pig way more calories than even a pig should have. And ultimately, the technology prevented that from occurring. So it was pretty interesting. Like we couldn't even induce diabetes with the balancing of the pancreas and the liver.
That's fascinating. That is fascinating. And what I think is really interesting is that this, I think hormone regulation is really the future for a lot of things. We see how much consumer interest there is in it, mainly with the testosterone movement with men, so many other things. And so I'm really excited to hear more about this, and I'd love to have you back on the show as the science for this develops. For those who are interested, and by the way, this is not investing advice. This is a podcast. I'm just a guy on the internet that interviews really cool companies. But if you are interested, I do recommend go to reshapelifesciences.com, click the investor tab, and you'll be able to see their 8K and some of their earnings call. Go through and read that and be sure to follow the science. And Paul, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. But aside from the website, where else can people find you online?
I'm on LinkedIn, certainly in our Paul Hickey. You'll see me there. And that's
fantastic. I want to thank our audience for joining. This has been another episode of the State of MedTech. If you like this episode and you're listening to this, let's say on YouTube, leave a comment for us in the video comment section. If you're listening to this on Spotify, believe it or not, we have a section where you can leave comments and answer polls. Go and look for it there. Give us some feedback, and hopefully we'll have Paul on in the near future to talk more about the science, about this new technology that they're developing. I'm your host, Omar M. Khateeb, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.